Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Shvis, Pedig Vav, Halacha Beis, and Halacha Gimel. Halacha Beis will move on from the Shalosh Harotzos, Oile Bavel territory, Bonafide Eretz Yisrael. Mitzat Sheni, we had Chutz La'aretz, then we had the Oile Mitzrayim. We're going to now introduce the status of Syria, which is basically where Syria is today, perhaps together with a little bit of Lebanon. And as we know throughout, that Syria, as we will call it, was conquered by David HaMelech, and Chazal coined it a kibush yachid. We'll speak a little bit more when we start learning the Mishnah. Bottom line is that it did not become full-fledged Eretz Yisrael. And as we will see, that Dinei Shvi'is must be observed there midrabanan. Now, when it comes to reaping or to harvesting produce, when we have in Parshas Bahar, right, the pasuk that reads, Eis sfiach ketzircha loy siktzoir, and the loy siktzoir, you may not harvest, doesn't only go on sfichim, goes on everything, on all produce. And again, it can't mean literally you can't harvest it at all. No, a person is allowed to take from their field, from their neighbor's field, a little bit of produce to eat, right? Mazin shalish seudos. What it does mean is that you're not allowed to reap it in the usual manner of reaping. You have to do it in an unusual manner. You have to do it in an altered manner. Now, reaping is something that you do to attached produce. Midoiraisa, the limitation, you have to make a alteration, is only for that which is attached. The moment the produce is detached, going from there until making the product finalized, like if you're going to make bread, right? So there is the harvesting of the grain, but then you have many steps, right? In Klal Gadol by Shabbos, right? There are 11 malachas connected to Sedura de Pas, right? Most of them begin after the reaping. Those midrabanan also have to be done in an altered manner. Now let's go to Syria. This will be the kernel of the whole din of Syria. Since Shvius in Syria is only midrabanan to begin with, everything goes down one notch. So that which has to be altered with a shinui, which is when it's attached, mida'iraisa, has to be done with the shinui midrabanan in Syria. That which is only under the rabbinic rule, you have to make a shinui with attached produce while you're preparing it. Only midrabanan. That in Syria will be mutar legamri. In Syria, when it comes to working with detached produce, when you are preparing it into food, there is no obligation, not even midrabanan, to make any type of shinui. You do it in the regular manner. That will be basically the law of Syria. Now, what we will have, something new in the sugya of Syria, will be b'chlal, that there is an isur for a Jew to rent out his animal to a Jew that's chashud al shvius, because the Jew that's chashud al shvius might use that cow to plow. I know that we learned above selling, and we had Beis Hillel, and Beis Hillel says, how do you know that he's buying it to plow? He might buy it to shecht. And therefore, we learned Beis Hillel holds you can sell your animals to a chashud, even if it's a part of chayreshes, because he might buy it to shecht. That's only when you're selling it, because the buyer has the right to shecht it. When you rent out your cow or other animals that are regularly used in the working of the land, the borrower or the renter doesn't have permission to shecht it. He will use it for, if he's chashad alash, that's one isur. And then there's another fascinating isur. You're not allowed to rent out your animal to a goy, even though a goy, on shvius, even though a goy, we'll see really, there might be a problem in general, we'll see. But there's a specific problem with shvius, because since mida'iraisa, I'm not allowed to have my behemoths working on Shabbos. So therefore, I'm not allowed to rent out my cow to a goy on Shabbos. My behema has to be shoyves mida'iraisa. Midrabanan, they applied the same thing to my animals. And even though the goy is not obligated to rest on Shvi'is, but I don't want my animal to be used in his working the land on Shvi'is. It's not a very interesting issue that we'll learn today. Oh, now, I want to give a quick intro to Mishnah Gimel. I know that, it was so beautiful, the Shalosh Haratzos, and we're learning about the borders of Eretz Yisrael. We're coming today back to real Shvi'is, and the third Mishnah is going back to the onion. And we spend so much time with the onion. This is a regular onion. Now, to share a nakuda, which is huge of today's daf, it was worth it for this. When it comes to behemoths and to people, we have a rule in kashrus that hayoytze min hatamei tamei and hayoytze min hatoher toher. So if you have, let's say, a non-kosher bird, its eggs are not kosher. If you have a non-kosher animal, the milk that comes out is not kosher. Hayoytze min hatamei is tamei. When it comes to the world of Soimeach, when it comes to vegetation, listen to our case, and you're going to see that it goes in the opposite direction. There was an onion. The onion was planted and plucked on the 6th year. It's a product of the 6th year. But you left it on the ground. When you leave an onion on the ground, sometimes it will draw nourishment from the ground, and its leaves will continue to grow, which is what happened. So now you have on this onion some minimal growth that happened on the 7th year, not from the moisture in the air, which would b'chlal not be problematic, but it grew because it took nutrients from the ground on the 7th year. So we're going to learn, this will be the word, that gidulin mevatlin eso ikar. Since now this onion has gidulin, leaves, that are a product of the 7th year, so the status of the holy onion will be of the 7th year. And we don't say hayotzim and hatohar is something that came out of the 6th year, has a din of the 6th year. We don't do it, doesn't work that way. It's punk fakert. That the little addition, that if we would to normally apply the dinim of bittul, it can be very little in quantity. But since there is gidulin that came out from the 7th year, if it came from the ground, so it transforms the status of the whole thing itself. And now we will view the onion as an onion of the 7th year with all of the consequences, as we'll see in the sugya of Halacha Gimel. That's a great intro. Now, let's start. Today we're learning Daf Mem Ches, and we are beginning on Daf Mem Zayin Amid Beis, all the way in the last line by the Mishnah. Now, just another few words specifically about Kibush Yachid. So again, David HaMelech was the one that conquered Syria. I'm going to share Shitas Toisvis that we learned together. And that is then that when are we able, through Kibush, to expand the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, if the entire Eretz Yisrael that God gave us was conquered, and now we want to expand it, so now the Kedusha overflows. Rabbi J.B. Soloveitchik was the one that gave a great mashal for this, is that for you to have a overflowing cup, the cup first has to be full. A cup cannot overflow if it's not full. So the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael is able to overflow when first the cup got full. Since he conquered Syria prior to the land itself being conquered, so the rule that Kibush of Yidden on lands adjacent Eretz Yisrael, it's going to extend the Kedusha, did not apply there. And therefore, Chevra, midoiraisa, you don't have to keep Shvi'is. The Chachamim said you have to keep Shvi'is, but there was a difference between keeping Shvi'is in Syria and keeping Shvi'is in Eretz Yisrael. And the difference that our Mishnah is speaking about is, as we spoke on in the introduction, is regarding the rule of the loy siktzoid, which never means literally, it's not that you can't harvest. You do have to harvest produce in an unusual, in an altered manner. In Eretz Yisrael, the Chachamim added that not only is the siktzoid altered, must it be altered, but even if the produce is already detached, now you're grinding it, now you are winnowing it, all of those steps also have to be done with a shinoi. They have to be done in an altered manner. In Syria, you have to alter the ksira midrabanan, and that which is already detached is mutar lechatchila. Let's read it inside. Oisin betolush beSuria. that you can work with detached produce without making any type of shinui. You could do it in its normal manner in Syria, daf mem ches on the top, avoloi b'mechubar, midrabanan. You have to behave with attached produce when you are harvesting it, mamish the way you would behave with attached produce when you harvest it in the Holy Land during Shvis. So there's a quantity that you can't go beyond that has to be left for hefker, and even the way you harvest it cannot be done in the usual manner. And let's give examples of attached and detached. So in Surya, as we mentioned, once it's already talush, there are no limitations. So therefore, when it comes to the threshing, to the disha, dashin, when it comes to the zoirin, when it comes to the winnowing, when it comes to the dorchen, if it's the treading on the grapes, or if it comes to ma'amer, right, a malacha that's very little spoken about, because a ma'amer is only by gedulei karka. According to many Rishonim, ma'amer is only by the place where it grew, right, ma'amer. So on Shabbos, if you have a basket of apples that fall, you are allowed to gather the apples and put them back into the bowl. People are not that familiar with ma'amer, but on the fields, there's an issue of gathering produce together. The ma'amer. Actually, many people say that the mekoishesh eitzim, right, you have various opinions. Many people hold the mekoishesh eitzim, that over at Parshas Shalach, or wherever it was from Bamidbar, that he was gathering sticks. Ma'amer. Right. Avol, so that you can do in Syria, in the regular manner. In the Holy Land, you have to do it with the shinui. Avol loy koitzrin, but when it comes to harvesting, you harvest something that's still attached. Now, in the Holy Tongue, even though in English, lahavdol, harvesting is a generic word, be'emes, it's not that way. That when it comes to grain, you use the word ketzira. When it comes to grapes, you use the words bitzira with a base. It means the same thing. When it comes to olives, you use the words mesika. In the normal manner, midrabana. And therefore, klal amar Rabbi Akiva. So you have to add these words. Even in Eretz Yisrael, there is no obligation to make a shinoi when it comes to produce that's already detached. That's only midrabanan. So that which is permitted midoi raisa could be done b'surya, even midrabanan. In other words, let's use the words. It has to be taken down a notch. If something is asan midoi raisa in Eretz Yisrael, it's asan midrabanan in Surya. If something is only asan midrabanan in Eretz Yisrael, it's mutar lechatchila in Surya. Simple. Says the Gemara. Oisen betolush besurya, avoloi b'mechubar. Okay. So we're going to focus actually why did the Chachamim institute this entire rabbinic limitation on Shvi'is? We know Surya is only Kibush Yachud. Kibush Yachud means it was not imbued with the bona fide Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. So listen to the words, Amar Rabbi Abo, Shelo Yihu Oilchen Umishtakin Sham. People did not want for Yidden to move out of Eretz Yisrael, to move into Syria. What would motivate them to move into Syria? Because the din, the mitzvah of Shvi'is is difficult. Can't work the land. You have to save up on the 6th for the 7th and for the beginning of the 8th. That motivates people to leave. So once the Chachamim says, no, you're going to leave to Syria, you're going to fight that. You're limited with Shvi'is. People are not going to go there. They're not going to move outside of holy Israel. So says the Gemara, so Oibazoi betolish lamo hu muter. Okay, so go all the way. So why are you giving some opening for people when it comes already to produce that's already detached? You can work the normal manner. Why? So the Gemara says, because we didn't want people to move even farther away. Now listen to these words. Min goy dochame rivcha karev, which means like this. They wanted people to live in Israel. When people commute to work up until a certain point, Syria is right near Israel. For a poor person who feels that it's too hard, Shvi'is, they'll live in Israel and they'll go work in Syria with the talush and they'll make their livelihood. If that is what they do. Everyone was farmers. Most people, they worked with the land. If they're going to make Syria like Eretz Yisrael, completely asur, so then people will move all the way. Then they're going to take a move away. Like this, they allowed the Syria, which is right on the northern border, right neighboring Eretz Yisrael, they lowered some halachis. So it's it's the perfect window where a person will say, listen, I'm going to live here, and that during Shvius, I'm going to travel there. It's gewaldig.
So on what premise are we always learning that parts of Syria is mechuyav le'inyan shel trumos v'masot?
First of all, let's not speak about Trumos u'Maisos. It's also midrabanan. And the countries around Eretz Yisrael we already mentioned, for sure. According to all of the Rishonim, Ammon, Moav, Mitzrayim, and Shinar are chayiv and Trumos u'Maisos. And we're going to learn about Syria soon. But you see, in other words, the question is, B'chalal, why did they make Shvius on all of these lands? Now you're getting the answer. Because if it would be mutar legamri, people would move over there. And they would send the kids to school in Israel. In other words, it's too close. When you make more restrictions, it's not worth it to move there. But you don't want to make it so restricted that people are going to move to America.
So it's like a balancing act.
It's a balancing act. It's gewaldig. You see how Parnasa, until today, Parnasa is one of the reasons we learned the Braisa and Brachas. One of the reasons why a person today is allowed to leave the Holy Land is because of Parnasa. So they want to make sure that people will find the livelihood still in Syria, but it shouldn't be too comfortable for them to say, let me live here. Everyone wants to live in Israel. It's like a balancing act. You have to weigh the pros and the cons. That they felt that this is the best setup. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Yossi ben Abun asked in front of Rab Mana, Mahu litchain im hagoy ba'aretz. Grinding just is a great example of working with detached produce. Okay? And what's the question? Now, there are many different ways of learning the question. Let's look inside the last narrow line in the Pnei Moshe. From there, going under the Gemara. It's the way the Pnei Moshe learns this question. What are the two sides? Do we say on one hand, the guy is allowed to do whatever he wants. So what's the issue? Okay? And guys, again, we're not talking about working the land. We're talking about working with detached produce. Oy, Dilma. Since you are living in Israel, how will the goy get the grain to grind? Because the goy worked the land. Is have ki goyim la sois avodas hakarka b'shvis. If he's going to have helpers grinding, he's going to be motivated to work the land more. The goy will work the land more. And maybe we should not have the land worked. In other words, is it a gavra? Is it a chefza? Is it that I'm not allowed to work the land? Or is it that Hashem doesn't want for the land to be worked? God did not give that on the goy. But if I'm going to help the goy do tchina, then the land will be worked more. So that was the question. Amalei, so Rabbi Yossi ben Abun told Rabbi Manam, from our Mishnah, we can infer Shuasur. Indeed. Why? Because since our Mishnah reads, Oisin betolush besurya, abaloi b'mechubar. What does that imply? It's an implication and an implication. It's so indirect. Abaloi b'mechubar. Now, okay, so now, these are the words of the Mishnah. Did the Mishnah speak about Eretz Yisrael? No. What does that infer? It says if the Mishnah would have written Haba Aretz Afilu Betolush Yehe Yasur. Look inside the Pnei Moshe, 4 lines under the Gemara. Masnisa Amra mi masnisin ikalam ifshel shuaser diktana oisem talosh besuriyo mashma Haba Aretz Afilu Betolush Yasur. Now, the Sharim Akum. If ba'aretz, there is an activity, betalush, that a yid can do in Eretz Yisrael, which is, if it's not his, if it's the goy's, the Lashon HaBabli would have been, lifleik v'litnei b'dida. Imkein mishkachas la, there would be a heichet timsa, the gam ba'aretz, mutar betalush. So v'amai ketani surya davka. You have to appreciate Talmudic way of understanding things. You can, in other words, when people look at this, say, what are you talking about? The Mishnah is talking about Syria. True. But the Mishnah is talking about one thing, and the Mishnah is in it talking about other things as well. And one of the things that Rabbeinu HaKadosh is telling you, it's as if he wrote it, that Ba'aretz Betalush is asur. And Rabbeinu HaKadosh cannot make such a implied statement if it depends. If betalush ba'aretz would be mutter, if it's the goys, then you cannot even imply betalush asur. And in this Mishnah, Rebbe would have had to said it. Lift like the litna b'didah.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
And I don't have such a good memory these days, but I seem to remember that we learned specifically a discussion of whether you're allowed to help a guy, whether you're even allowed to give words of encouragement to a guy.
Just learned
we
this.
Learned that.
Clearly.
So, what are we doing here?
There's a big difference. Okay, I'll tell you, there's a big difference. When a guy is working, we just had this at the end of the last chapter, and you tell a guy, Yasher koichacha, or good luck in your plowing, that's not going to make the land be worked more. It's going to give him chizuk. Whatever he planned to do, he'll do quicker, he'll do with more energy. But if a farmer knows there's only that much I can grind, if Jews are going to help me grind, I can plant double the amount. That's a whole different thing. That's mamish making the land. There's a big difference. I see a big difference. Kamus and echos. I think when you tell a guy, Zajac, when you encourage another person, they're not going to do more of what they're doing. They're going to do it with more koyach. You're giving them energy to what they're doing. Here, you're going to indirectly cause them to do more. And we want the land to rest. That's the line. Weiter. Mokem shu nechol. So now let's go back, Chavre. We're going back to the previous halach. And as we learned in the Shalosh Aratzos, right, that not the extremes, the in-between, the Oila Mitzrayim territory is a territory in which Taka Nechol. Nechol means there's no bi'ur restrictions. Even after Zman HaBi'ur, you can eat it, but you're not allowed to work the land. So in those lands, right, that you're not allowed to work the land, Mahu lahaskir behem toisham, am I allowed to rent out my behema that's normally used for working the land to a Jew that's chashud? Now, one of the ways of understanding this side of the question is there an isur to be misayeya lidei oivre avera if they're only oiver midrabanan? That would be one way of wording it. Now, however, the question isn't only to a Jew. Like we spoke out in our words of introduction, this question was really two questions. Everything is bekitzer. And like we mentioned, that it's just like on Shabbos. A Jew is not allowed to midoiraisa, rent out his animals to a goy who's going to be working with his animals on Shabbos. Miderabanan, rabbinically, I cannot have my animals working on Shvis. Problem is, I know that. But that maybe only applies where the Isur is Midoiraisa, Oile Bavel territory. But if it's Oile Mitzrayim territory, so it's only Midrabanan, same concept. Is there an issue of being Misayeya to an Isur Derabanan? Is there a problem with me re-renting out my cow when working the land with the cow is only Asur by the Goy? Me renting it out to a Goy is only where there's an Isur Doiraisa. The makim. If the makim to begin with is only midrabanan, maybe the chachamim didn't make like a double derabanan that you can't even there rent out your cow. That's the kashem. So answers the Gemara Rabbi Levi Sanbaria. Sha'al Rabbi Yitzchak ul Ravimi, and both of them said that in both cases it's asur. In other words, the way we are learning our Gemara, this is big, that the issue of being Misayer, even by Nisud Rabbanon, that even when the Isur of working the land to beginning is only Amid Rabbanon, still the Chachamim that said that my behema cannot be working the land, even though I'm renting it out to a Goy, especially based on we just learned, Danny, that Hashem did not want for the land to get worked. So why should my behema be involved in the working of the land, even though there's no obligation? That is true even when the Isur is only midrabanan. Beautiful. Says the Gemara Amaisa. Rabbi Shaya Yov la'amamaya pritin. That Rabbi Shaya told that the people that did rent out their animals to Goyim, which we just said now was asur, even in the territory of Oila Mitzrayim, he demanded that they should take the profits of what they made and they should give it away. To whom? To non-Jews. The money that they received, that they should give to non-Jews. It's amazing. Not only give it to tzedakah, to ayid, no, give it away. Now, loy mishum shu. Now, why ad kedei kach? Why ad kedei kach? So here the Gemara wants to tell you when we're speaking about renting out your animal to a goy, we focused up until now on the first one-liner. The whole thing is everything is one line over here with a tak and isur midrabanan then of renting out your working animal to a goy who's working the land on shvi'is, even though the goy can work the land on shvi'is. Your animal should not be working on shvi'is. It's going to remind me that on Shabbos, midoiraisa, I cannot rent out my animal to a goy. But now Rabbi Shai is reminding us of a bigger issue, and the bigger issue is that a goyim are chshudin al hareviyah, and therefore I am not allowed to b'chlal give them my animals. That's the issue. And he says loy mishum du asur, not because he necessarily agreed with what we with Rabbi Yitzchak and Avimi, even if he would have held it's mutin mitzad the din of shvius. In an oila bubble, oila Mitzrayim territory where the whole Yisrael is only midrabanan, the Chachamim did not say that you cannot rent out your animals. Mitzad shvi'is, nor was then elo shaloi liyached behem to'im hagoy. As we have over here, look inside Yoav Alam Peritin says the Marafulda. It's around 7 lines down from the beginning of the Gemara in the Marafulda. Oisen moi shagoy nosam lahem l'schirus. So the Yidden had money, had income. And he made it clear, not because I agree with Rabbi Yitzchak and Avimi. No. In the Bavli Avodah Zarah, after Zvav Amabeis, the Asur liyachid behem to legoy shechashudim al reviyam.
Is this an all-year general rule? Nothing to do with
all-year general rule.
Got it.
I'm sorry. Are we talking about revia of a goy's animal or a goy?
The goy with the animal.
Come again?
The goy with the animal.
Yes, bestiality.
Well, Danny, we want to stay legal on YouTube. Let's go weiter. You can laughing, and I don't want to get arrested. All right. Let's go weiter. Okay. So let's go back over here. So again, in Syria, midrabanan, you cannot work with attached produce. Kedarkoi. What produce are we talking about? It can't be produce of the 6th year. So let's go. Umanan kaiman. Let's just see the window of the issue of the Mishnah. With this, we are reviewing a lot that we learned before. If we're speaking about peiros here, doesn't mean fruit of the tree, but let's go. Peiros means produce. Now, if you remember, Chevra, how do we determine? Remember the 2 things, right? There's the Rosh Hashanah, and then there's how much of the produce needs to be readied for you to say, now that it's readied at this date, now I know what year it belongs to. By grain, it has to do with it being ready a third. So if the produce was readied a shlish in the 6th year, I want you guys to know, you're not allowed to plow the land on the 7th year. But that which is now fully ready on the 7th year, I can harvest kedarkoi. Midoy Raisa in Eretz Yisrael. It's not Peiros Shvi'is. So if we're speaking about Peiros Shishis, Shenichnusul Shvi'is, forget about Surya. That in Surya, since it's attached, you have to make a shinoi. No, even in Eretz Yisrael, you don't have to make a shinoi because it's not Peiros Shvi'is. Afilu ba'aretz mutar. Let me say something else. Let's go Peiros. Peiros means fruit. Okay. When do we determine the year of the fruit? It goes by Chanata and it goes by 2 Bishvat. So, Chevra, remember, if Peiros had its Chanata prior to 2 Bishvat of the 7th year, then when it's ready Shavuos time, I am allowed to harvest it ba'aretz in a regular manner. I'm not mafkid it. It's mine because it's Peiros Shishis. The working of the land is very simple to determine. From Echad B'Tishrei until Echad B'Tishrei, don't work the land. Don't plow the land. Don't plant the land. I get that. But when it comes to harvesting fruit, the Isur is Peiros Shavi'is. Remember, we learned this already. So first of all, if the peiros are halachically part of the 60 years yield, even though they became readied for me to harvest them on the 7th, even ba'aretz there are no restrictions. On the other hand, ibe peiros shvi'is, if they became grain, if they became readied a third prior to Rosh Hashanah of the 8th year, that means in the 7th year, or if peiros fruits of the tree, let's say, had their chanata from Tu B'Shvat, the 7th year, up until Tu B'Shvat, the 8th year, that's Peidoi Shvi'is. So then, the Mishnah is implying that, it means once we are already in the Peidoi Shvi'is, and now you want to harvest them, the Mishnah is implying that plowing would be permitted. Only harvesting is prohibited. When the Mishnah says, Avoloy b'mechubar, look inside the second to last line in the Marafulda. Masnisim mashma d'chol ha-mechubar asur besurya af charisha b'chlal. The Mishnah, when whatever that's mechubar asur, is even plowing is asur. Mishnah doesn't mean mechubar means when you detach it. When you harvest it, it means it's when it's detached. You can't detach it in a regular manner. You're not allowed to plow. If we're speaking about you harvesting it on the 8th year, even though you are limited to harvesting it on the 8th year, if the peiros are classified as peiros shavi'is, but on the 8th year you are allowed to plow the land. So therefore, daf is simple. Daf mechesem beis. Ella clarifies the Gemara. Why does our Mishnah talking about both? We're speaking about peiros that only became halachically readied in the 7th year. And you are harvesting them on the 7th year, which not only is there an issue with the peiros itself, on the 7th year you have an issue of charisha. That's the case of the Mishnah. And that is where we say that ba'aretz, you can't plow. Ba'aretz, when you harvest, you have to do a shinoi. Ba'aretz, even after you harvested it, when you're winnowing it, when you're threshing it, you have to do it with the shinoi. And that's what Chazal said, that in Surya is different. Can't work the land. Can't plow the land. When it's attached, usur, you can't harvest it in a regular manner. But in Surya, once it's detached, now you have to bring it from it being detached grains to making it into bread. You can do it the way you do it in the other 6 years. Says the Gemara, Rab Chuna went to Tzur. Guys, Tzur, now we know it's a city in Syria. I'm curious, today Tzur is a city in Lebanon? So that's why I said that.
Yes,
that
Lebanon.
Syria includes parts of Lebanon. Modern
It's
Lebanon.
called Sol.
Tzoir. Rab Chuna went to Tzoir, and what he said was, Amaisa, for us alone, Hadom Ashkiyasa, and he prohibited them even watering the fields on Shvi'is. So says the Gemara, Shamar Rabbi Yosef Amar, that's good, makes sense, it fits. Why? Because for Hadol, why? You're watering that which is attached. And that's how we learned in our Mishnah, that the Midrabanan Isur of Surya is takanat on detached, but watering is for the attached. Problem is, even in Eretz Yisrael, we learned this. By Yadavar Ha'avud, if you're going to have, let's say, irreparable damage, you can work. You can water. Watering is something that prevents the item to get ruined. And we're quoting at the beginning of Moed Cotton, Mashkin Beis HaShulach. And Beis HaShulach are fields that constantly need human irrigation. They can't live off rainwater. That means whatever is planted there needs continuous water. You are allowed to water it not only during Chol HaMoed, that's one of the 5 Etedim, the first one, Davar Ha'aved, but even in the year of Shvi'is. So what are you talking about? You're telling me, Rab Chuna, that in Sod you can't water, you can water the fields in the Holy Land. Amar Rabbi Yehuda answers the Gemara, no. When are we allowed to water the fields, even ba'aretz? That's if there are already seeds in the ground, l'zrayim shabai. And since the seeds are already in the ground, if you won't water it, those seeds will get ruined. To prevent loss, you can work by watering, even in Shvi'is, even in Eretz Yisrael. What was Rab Chuna talking about? He was speaking about land that had no seeds in it. And what would be the purpose for people to water such a land? Prior to plowing, as a hachana to plowing, they would water the land to make it more soft. That you're not allowed to do. That's the pshat of our Mishnah. Aval b'mechubar asur. Beautiful. Now, Rav Manaboya.
So that was to prevent them from plowing in year 7, not in year 8.
Very good.
Right?
Or even if they are preparing it for year 8, even if you're preparing for plowing in year 8,
That would also be
also because you're working b'mechubar. So says the Gemara, Rav Manaboya, ma'ato yehi mutar lachreish lahem. As the Pnei Moshe says, that one of the there's a machlok. Look inside the Pnei Moshe, the last narrow line. What charish is he talking about? Not the normal plowing. People sometimes plow. They make a ditch all around the field. Why do they do that? So if it's raining, or if they had other ways of getting the water there, for that circular soiviv ditch, for it to be filled with water, and that should be mutter. But to make an amal hashkoisa alidei kach, there's a machloikas. You are making a statement that straightforward, that if anything that you are doing to prevent seeds that are already in there from getting ruined, you are allowed to do. Why wouldn't everyone agree that you can even start working the land itself? See, watering is not working the land. But the emes is that it's not so simple. So in other words, he was objecting to this carte blanche that to prevent loss, you can do anything. It's not true. To prevent loss, you can water. Just that's what he was focusing on. But to go ahead and to say that if people want to dig a new amma, they want to dig a new canal for the purpose of it getting filled with water, so water should seep in the whole time, so it should be good for the seeds not to get lost. There's a machloikes. He says it doesn't fit. You're simplifying it. Zroim shaboy and Abchuna made a statement regarding a field that had no seeds. Even when there's seeds, there might be problems, and we're leaving it at that. I mean, you can say anachanami. If there's no seeds, avada asud. Even when there are seeds, there's a limit to how much you can do. I mean, that's more or less the maskana of where we're at. Let's move on, Chavra, to halacha gimel, because we have a big daf tomorrow. So now we're going back to the onion. Now I know we spoke about a unique onion before. Now we're going back to the regular b'tzalim. The challenge of our Mishnah, we spoke all this out before. Then, for a betzel to be classified as an onion of the 6th year and of the 7th year, it's almost impossible. Why? Because let's go by Yerakos, Basar, Lekita, Isurei. It goes after, what year is it? When did you pick it? If you picked it on the 6th year, it's 6th year. There's no issue. If you picked it on the 7th year, the whole thing is Asr. It's Peiroy Shvis. Asr means it's Peiroy Shvis. Our Mishnah is speaking about an onion. Let's go with the approach of the Rash. The Rabbeinu Shimshon. And Mishnah is that you harvest it. There's a Tosfos that says, we spoke to Sal Danny before, that if something is fully ready to be harvested, Basar Lekitoi doesn't have to mean that you actually took it out of the ground, but that it's ready and it won't grow more. We're not going with that. Let's go. We have to follow one mahalach. You had an onion. The onion was ready. You plucked it out of the ground. When? On the 6th year. Now, I want you to know that even in your kitchen, you can take an onion, and if the onion will absorb moisture from the air, more of the green leaves will grow. If that happens on Shviz, it's not called Peiroy Shviz, because it got its new growth from the moisture in the air. But if you harvested it, which is what people did, they had no refrigeration. Sometimes they would leave it on the field, and it would grow on the ground. Then there's a possibility that the extra growth that happened on the 7th year, the green leaves grew from nutrients from the ground of the 7th year. And as we spoke on in the words of introduction, that's the big chiddush today, that gidulin mevatlin esoikar. It's a big chiddush. If indeed that happened, we don't say only those leaves are problematic, even though we learned that previously. We have a mixture of leaves. In our onion, we don't do that for some reason. By the regular onion, we say that if there are gidulin that grew on the 7th year, that transformed the ganze onion into an onion of the 7th year. Let's read it inside. B'tzalim sheyardu aleim geshamim v'tzimchu. So you have b'tzalim of the 6 years. And like we explained, and you left it on the ground, and it rained. So there's a lot of moisture. There's moisture in the air because it rained, and there's moisture in the ground. If the leaves grew from the moisture in the air, there's absolutely no problem. If the leaves grew from the moisture in the ground, that will classify, that was mahapech, in the negative. It made a hayisapcha. The whole onion is of the 7th year. So how are you to determine? It depends on the color of the leaves. As the Gemara, I hope we get to the first line in the Gemara. Shchoidim doesn't mean black. There's a bad black. There's a black means that it's getting moldy and it's going to wither away. Black here, dafka, means if it's a dark green. If it's a dark green, that's a raya that it grew from the nutrients in the ground. This is so gavaldik. We're becoming big. We're becoming farmers. The way our
We're becoming horticulturists.
That's an American words. Poyed was our words. And then
Fishman understands.
Then it's asur. But if hoiriku, this is so geschmack. If it's light green, if it's pale green, that means that it grew from the precipitation in the air. It grew from the moisture in the avir. It didn't come from the nutrients in the ground. And therefore the gidulin did not come from the 7th year, and therefore they remain onions of the 6th year, and they are permitted like onions of the 6th year. Again, don't think onions of the 7th years are asur. It's not chazir. It means it's restricted to the dinim of Pedeshvis. There's another opinion. By the
way, here we're saying that the leaves answer the actual onion, right?
Previously, this concept no one is debating with. This is so beautiful. We're going to get back to it. It's called gidulin, mevatlin, and so'ikr. It's the opposite. We said by the kingdom.
By the luf, or what was we learning last time? I thought then we were only talking about the leaves and the bulb itself.
Not only that,
fine.
very good, very good. So that was a different type of onion. We never spoke about regular onions. That was a different type of onion. This is a regular onion. What
was the name of that onion?
No, you go back.
It was the luf.
Luf. We're not talking about it. We're talking about a batzel. Luf l'chud or batzel l'chud. Now let's go right. You don't go by the color of the green, but you go by something else. We'll take out the word einam. Guys, this is how it works. That when the leaves are strong, because they grew from the nutrients of the ground, they're going to be so tightly connected to the onion that b'chlal, by all onions, when they become very mature, they are protruding by themselves a little bit from the ground, and you can pick them by grabbing their leaves. When they are completely under the hard ground, you'll pick the leaves, you'll rip off the leaves, but the bulb will stay in the ground. But b'chlal, by onions, when they are fully ripe, which also means that they came more to the surface, you can pick them out. So if these new leaves are so strongly attached to the onion that if the onion would have been in the ground, it's not, we already explained what's happening here, but if the onion would have been in the ground, you would be able to get it out of the ground without even digging the ground, without needing to grab the bulb, just by picking up the leaves. That's his siman that it grew from nutrients in the ground. If the leaves are not so strong,
regardless of the color,
notice each one has a different siman to determine if the additional growth that happened on the 7th year of the leaves were from the nutrients of the ground or if they came from the air. But everyone holds to the concept of gidulim mevatlin esoiker. Now, keneged kain moitze shvius mutarin. This is very important. Let me tell you what it's not. If you have, guys, listen to this. This is very important. It's late. If you have an onion that grew on the 7th year and you picked it on the 7th year and you put it on the ground and then it grew on the 8th year. Let's go with the Tanakama and it's green, dark green. We don't say Gidulin Mevatlin or Iker. Once something is classified as Shvi'is, essentially, Be'etzem from the beginning, it cannot be Nishapech to not Shvi'is. But the Mishnah is only speaking about a case, it grew on the 6th year. Listen, so it's 6th year, it's good. Narvos then, a little bit of green leaves made it into a 7th year, because Gidulin Mevatlin Ha'ikr. Now we say that just like the Gidulin of the 7th year, were Mevatl the Ikr, now if it grew more on the 8th year, now Vaited it grew more. You left it on the ground for another year.
Same onion.
The squirrels did not take it.
We're
they
in
don't
the
like
third year.
onions. The third, exactly. Now you say, just like the extra leaves transformed from the 6th, it became the 7th. Since in the beginning it was the 6th, now the new leaves of the 8th year brings back the status of the 6th year. Now we say Gidulin, but that's the Mishnah, Keneged Kei Moitze Shvius Mutarin, only in the case that I mentioned. But as we'll see in the Gemara, but if it Taka grew on the 7th, we don't say Gidulin Mevatl Iker. I want to just add one thing, which is beautiful, and this is so hopeful, that if someone, the idea that Gidulin Mevatl Iker, think about the power that it has on a human being. If we can be Tzameach like, that means that even if the Iker is not good, think about the koyach. I did one mitzvah. I did a epis. I did good. It transforms everything until then. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, but this Mishnah seems to be saying it's only going in the direction of making it usher.
No, in kedusha, it only goes in there making it holy. Shvius is holy, Danny, not usher.